Coming up, taxpayers take a hit on a failed Trump prosecution in Georgia, and Southern Republicans race to redraw voting districts. The Tennessee House just approved new maps, with the Senate expected to follow any minute. And America's talking. This is the Center Square Daily for May 7th, 2026. I'm your host, Johnny Edwards, filling in for Greg Bishop. As watchdog journalists, sometimes we have to take note not of what politicians say, but what they don't say. And one elected prosecutor in the state of Georgia doesn't want to say anything about an elephant in the room. That is, how much taxpayer money Fulton County DA Fani Willis spent in her failed attempt to convict Donald Trump of racketeering. It's been 5 months since a judge dismissed the case entirely, and the Center Square has been asking for the price tag for the past 4 months. So far, we're getting nothing out of DA Willis. Now, for years, this case commanded worldwide attention, with a former U.S. president accused of conspiring to overturn an election. It was, of course, one of several prosecutions Trump faced between his 2 terms. The Fulton County investigation began in 2021, shortly after Trump's recorded phone call with the Georgia Secretary of State, where Trump said, "I just want to find 11,780 votes." The indictment handed down in 2023 was sweeping. Trump and 18 co-defendants charged with racketeering and conspiracy. Allegations of fake electors, of an election system breached, and an election worker allegedly harassed. So why are we asking now how much money this case cost? Well, because this case imploded spectacularly, and not just on the merits. First, the case ground to a crawl after another defendant accused Willis of a romantic relationship with outside counsel Nathan Wade. Wade was being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars by the county at the time. The Georgia Court of Appeals removed Willis from the case due to a, quote, appearance of impropriety. The case went further into limbo when Trump won re-election. It collapsed completely late last year when a new prosecutor dismissed all the charges. All in all, the case produced 4 guilty pleas, but no jail time. Sentences included probation, fines, and letters of apology. So that brings us to the bill. We know that county payments to 3 special prosecutors, including Nathan Wade, total $1.2 million, though how much of that was exclusively for work on the election interference case isn't clear. Not all of it for sure. We also know that because of a recent change in state law concerning disqualified prosecutors, taxpayers could be stuck paying nearly $17 million in defendants' legal fees, including President Trump's. The county's lawyers are fighting that. But there were other internal costs, potentially millions more dollars: staff time, travel, meals, security, media engagement, the special grand jury. So how much of the DA's annual budgets went into the Trump case? The DA's office has not provided any answers, despite an open records request filed by the Center Square, instead pushing back the timeline to respond until June. We also tried asking the county's finance department, but it said its records aren't organized by criminal cases. One Republican county commissioner told us she's been trying to get an answer to this same question for years. Bridget Thorne said she even tried asking DA Willis personally in a 2023 Zoom meeting, but that didn't go well, with Willis ending the call abruptly. Thorne said there were a lot of other hidden costs to this drawn-out case.
Taxpayers certainly didn't get anything back from it. If anything, they got things taken away from it. Courts that weren't moving, cases that weren't being indicted, people that were in jail too long, overcrowding the jail, people dying in our jail, filing lawsuits, people just not being treated well in the jail, outside the jail, and the taxpayer as well. A lot of people were hurt.
We reached out to DA Willis as well as her spokesman, but got no response. You can find this story and others by the Center Square's investigative team at thecentersquare.com. Again, this is the Center Square Daily. Let's turn now to Kim Jarrett, associate editor and the Center Square's reporter in Tennessee. Kim has been all over the biggest story in the state right now, which is Republican lawmakers racing to redraw voting districts in the wake of a U.S. Supreme Court decision that, in effect, takes race out of the equation. The Tennessee General Assembly is voting on a new map today. That map, of course, leans heavily Republican and places Shelby County, that's where Memphis is, into 3 separate congressional districts. Welcome, Kim.
Hi, Johnny.
Kim, tell us the significance of that. What's the effect of putting Shelby County into 3 separate congressional districts?
So basically, Shelby County, Memphis area is the only Democratic congressional seat in Tennessee. The other 8 are all Republicans. Last Friday, Governor Bill Lee, kind of at the response of all these things that happened after the Louisiana Supreme Court case, called lawmakers back into session. And what they have been doing the past 2 days is attempting and have now finalized just about an hour ago in the House, and the Senate's voting now. They have finalized a map that puts Memphis into 3 separate congressional districts that will most likely lean heavily Republican. And you can never predict elections, but most likely will give Tennessee 9 Republican seats instead of 8 Republican and 1 Democrat seat.
Wow. Wow. Well, let's back up a little bit. Tell us about this Supreme Court decision. What exactly did it do? And what is it that Republicans are seizing upon out of this?
So basically, this was a Louisiana decision that where the Supreme Court said, okay, these maps, it was a challenge to some maps, and the Supreme Court came back and said, hey, race is really not a factor when you're redrawing congressional districts. So a lot of states besides Tennessee have jumped on this. Alabama is having a special session. South Carolina is voting on new maps this week. So a lot of Republican states are actually voting on new maps. And as the Tennessee lawmakers are saying, this really isn't about race anymore. And now with the Supreme Court decision saying, hey, those maps don't rely heavily on race anyway, they're admitting this is about politics. This is about Republican seats. Just a few moments ago, Senator John Stevens was testifying on the Senate floor, and he basically said, look at all the states like Virginia and Illinois. They have redrawn maps to favor Democrats. This is our attempt to favor Republicans and to have a national Congress that is a Republican majority.
Was what's happening in Tennessee, can what they're doing in Tennessee impact things nationally?
Definitely. Now, Tennessee they're only redrawing 1 new Republican district. But if you look, say, Governor Brian Kemp in Georgia, he decided not to call a special session. That could have had a huge impact in Georgia, where you have 8 Republicans and 6 Democrats. If they had decided to go and redraw lines, you could have shifted 3 or 4 seats possibly. If you look at what they did in Virginia, they shifted several seats to Democrats with their maps. Also in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis just approved some redistricting lines there Monday, but they're already under a court challenge. There are going to be court challenges to all of these maps. The maps, whether it's a Democrat state like Virginia or a Republican state like Florida.
Well, now this goes without saying, but describe just how angry Democrats are right now.
It's really crazy at the Tennessee Capitol. They have had to have law enforcement remove people out of committee rooms yesterday. I said there was a lot of protest outside the Capitol as well. In fact, we're showing some footage of that now. Today, during the House debate, House Speaker Cameron Sexton had to stop many times and ask law enforcement to clear protesters out. Toward the end of the House vote on the redistricting maps, there was a lot of loud protest, and Speaker Sexton just spoke over the protesters, and they just ended the session. Pat did the vote and just ended the session. So yeah, it's been loud at the Tennessee Capitol this week.
What else can you tell us about these protesters? Can you tell who they are? Or are they regular citizens? Are they other politicians, or what?
It's a combination. It's a lot of different groups and some regular citizens that are coming out. Basically, the things that they're saying is they say these maps are all about race. Memphis is about half of the Tennessee population, depending on who you talk to, of the Tennessee population in Memphis is Black. So you have a huge, a lot of that part of the state is Black, and they're saying you're diluting the Black vote. This is all you're doing. Republicans are saying this is about politics. So you got different sides there. A lot of the screaming is get your hands on. There's a lot of signs, a lot of things going there, but it seems to be a lot of different groups out there protesting, and they are loud. And if you have watched anything on the Tennessee General Assembly's website, you can hear them.
Now, could this strategy potentially backfire on Republicans? I mean, aren't Americans fed up with, instead of voters choosing politicians, politicians choosing the voters?
Well, you have a few Republicans in the Tennessee House who have kind of spoken out against this change. In order for Tennessee to do this, they had to basically override a law that they passed years ago that says you can't redraw your districts unless it's in reapportionment time. That typically happens during census counts. So then when they overrode that law, you had 5 Republicans who voted against it in the House. So in all ways, as we know, politics change. It may take a long time, but let's say that Tennessee becomes a more Democrat majority state. Of course, you don't know what could happen then. Things are very circular. So yeah, it could. And then two, with the shifts in the Republican Party that you are seeing nationwide, who knows what will happen, come a year or two or 10 years from now.
Something else very interesting you reported this week. Stacey Abrams, a two-time candidate for governor of Georgia, went to the Tennessee Capitol to speak out against this. What was she doing there, and what was her message?
Well, her message was basically what the Democrats were saying. Basically, she was saying this is not fair. This is diluting Black vote. If you recall, Stacey Abrams founded an organization in Georgia that was all about Black voting rights and voting rights in general. So she was just one of many speakers there who came to say, hey, this is not right. Please don't do this. She spoke for about 3 minutes and 45 seconds, I think they said. And she took a few questions from the panel yesterday. She didn't speak very long. She spoke to the Senate Judiciary Committee, but she was there and she was a presence at the Capitol this week.
Now, something else interesting this week, U.S. Representative Steve Cohen, the sole Democratic congressman representing Tennessee, likened this to putting Black voters, quote, in the back of the bus, just like Rosa Parks. Now, I mean, is that political theatrics, or do you believe there's serious concerns about disenfranchising Black voters here?
Well, I'm going to refer to what State Representative Jody Barrett said on this show yesterday. We interviewed him, I think it was Tuesday, and he basically said, no, I think he called it a red herring. He said, that's just not true. He says it's purely politics. We are purely trying to make all of our congressional districts Republicans. That is what Cameron Sexton, the House Speaker, said about it yesterday. That's what John Stevens said about it less than 30 minutes ago on the floor of the Senate. They're basically just trying to redraw all of their congressional districts because they want to help Congress have a Republican majority in 2027.
Wow, it's incredible. And that is some excellent reporting, Kim. Kim Jarrett, Associate Editor for the Center Square. We appreciate you taking the time today. You can follow her stories and other election coverage by the Center Square at thecentersquare.com. Now let's take a look at quick clips from America's Talking with headlines from across the country. If you want to read more about any of these stories, all articles are linked in the description down below. Starting off, Illinois, where new tax proposals being considered by the Democrats could bring in nearly $7 billion in revenue to the state. Among the proposals, a billionaire wealth tax. One supporter said billionaires are unfairly consolidating wealth while they receive tax breaks at the federal level. Critics say the proposals could drive capital and jobs out of the state. Next up, Wisconsin, where election managers in Dane County and the city of Madison face a second lawsuit over ballot counting problems. A law firm filed a lawsuit this week on behalf of two voters whose ballots from the April election may not have been counted because those ballots were delivered to the polls late. Wisconsin law requires all ballots to be at their polling places by 8 p.m. Madison's clerk has not said why 23 ballots were late, but said the person tasked with delivering them was, quote, delayed. The Wisconsin Elections Commission last month said the late ballots should not be counted. Madison and Dane County's Board of Canvassers this week voted to appeal that decision. This is the second lawsuit involving Madison's election managers, and the same law firm, Law Forward, is also behind a lawsuit for nearly 200 voters whose votes went uncounted in the November 2024 election. Moving on to Louisiana, back to the South again, Governor Jeff Landry has joined Senator John Kennedy in defending private property rights in a dispute in Baton Rouge over legislation enabling industrial carbon capture and storage. This legislation threatens control of ancestral rural land. Kennedy said on the Senate floor last week that the constitutional right to own land is, quote, sacrosanct. Landry on Tuesday endorsed Kennedy's speech, saying on X that, quote, no one can take your land for oil, gas, or carbon storage. Despite this united front, a Republican-led committee in the Louisiana House of Representatives recently moved in the opposite direction. In March, in a 12-7 vote, the Natural Resources and Environment Committee rejected a ban on eminent domain for carbon projects, preserving the state's power to take land for pipelines and storage. Last but not least, California, where the U.S. Department of Education has opened a Title IX investigation into the Los Angeles Unified School District over sexual misconduct allegations. The feds say the district is reassigning teachers accused of such misconduct to other schools instead of removing them. But the district told the Center Square that such reassignment means sending teachers home during the investigations. The Department of Education declined to enter the Center Square's questions, but it did say in a press release that the school district, quote, appears to be protecting sexual predators at the expense of its students. According to the department, the sexual misconduct included engaging in romantic relationships with students. The department also said the school district's policy was, quote, cemented in an agreement with the teachers union, end quote, that appears to guarantee teachers will not be fired or immediately removed during investigations of sexual harassment, sexual behavior with a student, child pornography, unnecessary physical contact, and failure to report suspected abuse. A spokesperson for the district, who wouldn't give their name, said the district takes all allegations of sexual misconduct and harassment with the utmost seriousness. That is your quick clips from across the country here with the Center Square Daily. I'm Johnny Edwards. Join us again on Friday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from around the nation, only with the Center Square Daily. Thanks for joining us.